Hello, adventurers. I am the wise old man, aka the hip old man, and today I am going to tell you all a little story about one of the most difficult situations I've ever found myself in. And boy, have I been in some sticky situations back in my day. But before we get started, do me a favor and spec that like button and subscribe to the channel with notifications on, so you'll be notified each time a new chapter goes live. Now, grab yourself a drink, a snack, and let's go on an adventure. Chapter 1. Ambushed. It was a cold, rainy night in Draenor. I remember the candle, flickering low in the corner of my study, melting into a stub. I was deep in a tome, runes of the Fourth Age maybe, or something older. The kind of knowledge you don't just read, you feel it pulse beneath your skin. That's when the knock came. It was soft, polite even, a courtesy before violence. I opened the door, half expecting a lost adventurer or some village brat with cabbage questions. Instead, shadows flooded in, hooded figures, fast and silent. I barely raised my staff before a flash of purple, smoke, cold hands around my throat, and then a large blow to my head. I awoke in a strange room with a man pacing in front of me. I had been stripped of my belongings with nothing but the clothing on my back and no recollection of who I was or how I got there. I approached the man dressed in red and white to try and get some answers, and he informed me that I was in the world of Gielinor, a vast and dangerous place. If I was to survive here, I would need to learn the basics of survival, so the man sent me off to meet up with some of his mates who could help me do just that. First, I met Brinna, a self-proclaimed survival expert. She gifted me a small fishing net, a bronze axe, and a tinderbox, before showing me how to catch some shrimp, cut down a tree, start a fire, and cook said shrimp. These skills would for sure come in handy if I was going to survive in this world. After learning all I could from Brinna, she sent me on my way to a man who would be able to take my cooking game to the next level, Master Chef Lev. I met him in a small house just up the road, and he wasted no time with small talk, immediately handing me some flour and water, promising to teach me how to make bread. I used the two ingredients to create some dough before I used his range to turn it into bread. It came out perfect, and the smell of the bread was delightful. He told me a few of his favorite recipes before sending me off to go meet a fellow who could teach me about mining and smithing, another vital skill to know. It was a bit of a trek to find this man, as he worked deep in the caves below the island, but eventually I found him. Upon greeting him, he asked for my name, and all of a sudden I came to the realization that I had no idea what my name actually was. I quickly looked myself up and down, and based on the hip clothing I was wearing and the long, untrimmed white beard I was rocking, I told him he could call me Hip Old Man. He went on to tell me his name was Desik, before handing me a pickaxe and instructing me to go mine some tin first, and then some copper. It was an easy enough task to accomplish, and from there, I used Desik's furnace to smelt the ores into a bronze bar. From there, it was on to part 2 of the lesson, smithing. So he handed me a hammer and showed me how I could turn the bar I smelted into a bronze dagger. With my new weapon made, it was time I learned how to use it. So I headed off in the direction of the rat pits to find a man named Vannaka. Vannaka didn't seem as friendly as the rest of the people I'd met up to that point, but he did look like he knew what he was doing. And if he was actually the greatest swordsman alive, like he claimed to be, there would be no better person in the world to learn from. He gave me some tips and tricks, before handing me a bronze sword and a wooden shield, and sent me off into the rat pits to test my strength. The rats down here were massive, and they fought ferociously, but my bronze sword made easy work of them. After putting my new skills to the test, I returned to Vannaka to see what was next, and he seemed genuinely impressed by my sword skills. But he also wanted to show me how I could attack my opponents from range, so he handed me a short bow and some bronze arrows, and sent me off to take on some more rats. This felt a whole lot better, being able to take out the rats from the safety of behind a fence, but it still didn't feel quite right. Once I'd mastered the basics of the bow, It was time to bid farewell to Vonica and head off to meet a banker about getting myself a bank account set up. The process was rather simple, and they hooked me up in no time at all, before sending me off to meet a couple more nice fellows who would teach me how to get in touch with my magical side. First, I met Brother Brace, who taught me about something called prayer, which sounded like a skill that could come in handy along my journey. And then I met Tarova, who taught me about magic. After being shown how I could unlock the magic within me, suddenly my whole body felt different. It was an amazing sensation, and something deep down just felt right about it. As I continued to practice my newfound abilities on the chickens nearby, I could feel myself getting stronger and stronger. This was for sure a skill I wanted to study more into and eventually master. But after spending some time with Tarova learning what I could, it came to a point where he had taught me all that he was willing to teach me and told me it was time for me to go to the mainland. He went on to explain that he was sending me to a place called Lumbridge and that there was a man there with a big staff who would help me take my next steps on my journey to rediscover who I am. Then, without any warning, before I could even say goodbye, Tarova cast a spell at me, and purple beams of light surrounded me as I could feel my body being pulled in all directions before everything faded to black. As I came to, I found myself in a strange village, surrounded by tons of people I'd never seen before. I walked around a bit until I could see the man Tarova told me about just off in the distance. He introduced himself as Phileas, and he was a very helpful man. First, he informed me of a general store just up the road that could help me gear up for my journey, and then he gave me some tips on how I could get myself some coin to pay for said gear. Apparently, there was a gang of goblins just over the bridge that were hoarding up some items of value that I could sell on for some coins, if I could manage to defeat them in combat. But first, I needed to stock up on some runes if I was going to stand a chance against them, and luckily enough, Phileas knew of a lady who hangs out nearby that gives free runes to struggling adventurers. So I went on over, got a couple runes from her, and headed off to take on the goblins. They were tough, but the more and more I practiced my magic, the easier they were to deal with, and all of the loot I was collecting from them started to rack up to a pretty nice cash stack. As my bags filled up, I would make trips over to the general store to sell what I could, pick up some more runes, and purchase a few items to make the fight a little easier. I even managed to buy for myself a nifty new staff that made my magic a lot stronger. But after several hours of fighting goblins, I could see the sun starting to set, and after all of the crazy things that I had been through today, I decided it would be a good time to look for a spot to camp out for the night. Before I did though, I figured I'd check in at the general store one more time before they closed, to see if they'd gotten any new stock, and boy, am I glad that I did. There on the shelves stood a beautiful blue party hat, as they called it, that just called out to me for some reason. I immediately purchased it, put it on my head, and it felt as if a piece of my soul that had been missing had been restored. But it was starting to get dark, so I grabbed a quick pint at the pub across the street before making camp for the night. And that brings an end to Chapter 1 of Tales of the Wise Old Man. If you're enjoying the story so far, make sure to spec that like button and subscribe to the channel with notifications on so you don't miss when Chapter 2 goes live. The story's only just beginning. But until the next one, I'll see you in Gillinor. Thanks for watching another video. If you'd like to watch Chapter 2 of this story, if it's available, click on the video to the left. Or if you'd like some other RuneScape related content, click on the video to the right.